Thank you for joining us today on Improving's Lunch and Learn series. I'm Michael Slater, your host. Our speaker today is Don McGreal, and he will be talking to you about remote product ownership.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Michael. And thank you, everybody, for joining me today. So the topic is remote product ownership, steering the ship from afar. So obviously, in the recent days, we've had to change the way we work quite a bit. I've played the product owner role a lot over the years. I played all the roles in Scrum. I was a team member, I was a Scrum master, and I've worked remotely from time to time, but never to the extreme that's required today. So this is going to be a little bit about things that we've done in the past for distributed teams as product owners. It'll also be a little bit about what we've learned just in the past couple months dealing with COVID and the whole work from home piece. We've learned these things working with clients, working with our own people at Improving, and we also teach a lot of classes, and there are some things that we came up with within the class that hopefully you'll find interesting as well. So with that, let's get started. So a couple of things from a logistics standpoint. There should be an ability to enter questions in there, right, Michael? There's a
That's
little,
correct.
yeah. So what I'm going to hopefully do, so I don't want to wait till the very end for the questions. So I'll pause a few times during the talk. So please, as I go along, I'd much rather be chatting with you along the way. That's much more my style, to keep it as informal. But I know it's hard when there's a lot of people online at the same time. So what we'll ask you to do is, as we go through this, feel free to type in some questions into the chat, and then I'll pause at certain points to ask them, and Michael can read them off. So a little bit about Improving and me. So Improving, we have 8 offices around North America. So we have like 3 in Texas, a couple in Ohio, Columbus and Cleveland. We're in Atlanta, we're in Minneapolis. We're also in Calgary, Alberta. We're international. But overall, what we do is we help people build software. We have customers that come to us and say, would you please, here's an initiative that we don't have the ability to do. Would you do it for us? Then we also have people that say, hey, we could use some help. We don't have enough people, and then we would help them. And then others that say, hey, can you show us how you guys do it when you do it yourselves? And that's where I come in. I lead up training. And part of that is also coaching as well. So training in classroom will show you how to do these things. And then coaching will come to you and work with you to learn these things. So we have all sorts of services. I've played a lot of roles. Product owner is the one I've kind of grown the most passionate about over the years. I went from kind of a business analyst writing down requirements to something to really taking more ownership over the direction of the product. With that, I'm a trainer with scrum.org, so I do the Certified Professional Scrum Product Owner course quite a bit. I'm a steward for that, meaning I help build a lot of that course. And then with that, my colleague and I, Ralph, have written a book called The Professional Product Owner. And so that's available on Amazon too. And that should be enough. You'll learn more about me as we go here. So big picture here. For those that know me, when I talk about product ownership, I really do focus on a particular aspect of it and break it down for what's needed for product ownership. So let's start with that. And then what we'll do is we'll go through how we bring these things to life in a remote setting. So I'm going to make some assumptions here that those of you on the call are already product owners, and won't go through the basics of product ownership. But generally what we like to look at is this, we call this the planning onion, the big picture. And what you have is at the top, an overall organization vision and strategy. And in the middle, or the bottom, I guess, is a daily plan that happens if you're using Scrum, and a plan for the sprint, so no more than 30 days out. What we like to say is that the daily plan and the sprint plan belongs to the development team, the people doing the work. And then on the outside, the business strategy and company vision, that belongs to executive level. That basically describes the CEO. But then there's this big area in between in a product company. Any kind of product or service that you're building needs a vision, needs a strategy, and it needs a plan on how it gets out to your customers, a release plan. And what we've noticed is that this is lacking quite a bit with our customers and just in the industry as a whole. We've started calling this the product management vacuum. It creates a void that will be filled if you don't fill it the right way. And what we see it getting filled with a lot are things like project charters and project plans that focus on time, budget, scope, like Gantt charts and milestones of certain points where you check lists and requirements are done, analysis done, that kind of thing. And inside of them, we're not saying that what's on the right is wrong here. It's just that they tend to end up being very project focused, where if we're on time, on budget, on scope, then everything is good. But the reality is that's not true. We can be on time, on budget, on scope. We can have our charter filled out perfectly and still deliver a bunch of stuff nobody wants. So what we prefer to focus on are the 3 V's. Establishing a true vision. This isn't just about writing a great sentence or two that describes where we're going. This is about communicating it, permeating it across your organization, within your team, with your stakeholders, so they really buy into it. We also talk about value in terms of product strategy, how to better decide when we consider what we're doing successful. So it's not about time, budget, scope. Maybe it's more about customer happiness or increased revenue, lower costs, better time to market, beating the competition, market share. So whatever that is, that's what we want our product owners focused on. And then finally, looking at a release plan, not as just a milestone, as a way to indicate we've come a certain distance, but instead looking at a release plan as the opportunity to validate our ideas. Because even the best product owners will come up with an idea using what the customers are telling them and users and stakeholders, but nobody knows for sure when this thing goes out to your customers that it will actually have any value, that it will perform the way it should. So looking for opportunities to validate our hypothesis is also squarely in the product owner's realm. So what I'm bringing this up for is that when we talk about remote development, this is what we're going to focus on. Is we're going to use these 3 V's. We're going to go through the 3 V's and ways to demonstrate this in a remote context. So we're going to focus more on the things on the left than the things on the right. There is value on some of these things on the right. There is a typical project charter has a section on vision in it, but do we actually read it? Do we actually keep it up in front of us all the time? Or did we just say we have a charter, we have a vision, and we move on to the next thing? So just because you have a vision doesn't mean you have a vision, if you know what I mean. So these 3 V's provide sort of the framework for this session. We're going to go through these 3 sections. We're going to be talking about certain aspects of vision, value, validation, and then some things you can do along the way. So it's called distributed. 3 V's will drive us here. Now, a few things. When we talk about remote stuff, we want to be able to collaborate when establishing a vision and measuring value and validating our ideas. And sometimes we use the excuse that we're not together as a way to take control or to force things done or do it by ourselves and hand it out to people. So you'll hear me say this a few times, and this is something I hope you hold or you get out of this if you don't already think this way, is just please don't let the fact that you're distributed be an excuse not to collaborate. In today's world, and I've been constantly surprised by how well this is going, there are all sorts of ways to increase collaboration. And I wouldn't have said this 5 weeks ago, that even in these remote times, there is a benefit. There's a plus side. We can actually do some of the things we need to do better because of that fact. We can collaborate more effectively in certain areas. There are some obvious downsides, but I will be talking about some upsides to being remote as well. So there's also along the way, this is not a tooling talk. I'm not going to describe how to use the tools, but I will show you examples. There are all sorts of things out there. So just in this one alone, we'll be looking at examples from Lino, which is a virtual corkboard, and Weave, which is innovation games, Continue Weave, which is now bought by Scaled Agile. Mural, Miro, collaboration tools that are really popular these days. And then the ones that I'm sure people know are Google Docs and Microsoft Office 365. So we'll be just dumping those in there as we go. But just understand we will not going to be describing how to use these remote tools. Just know that they're possible, they're out there. I'm sure there's plenty of opportunity for you to go out and look at that and learn them yourselves. We also will not be covering the basics of remote collaboration, how people learn best. We're not going to make the point that looking at somebody's face improves your ability to communicate with them. That stuff, you can read about it. There's plenty of evidence on it, and also it was covered. If you happen to go see my colleague Ty's talk last month, he did one on remote Scrum Mastery where he covered people, logistics, technology, the events in Scrum. He went through all the events in Scrum and how to use those remotely. So we won't be getting into those details. We'll only focus on the events that are relevant to the product owner, and then other things beyond the Scrum events as well. So we'll be talking about sprint planning, what you can do there. We'll talk about review. We won't be getting into daily scrums. Ty spent some time on that in his talk if you want to jump over and watch that one. But as a product owner, you can certainly go, but that's not your event. So let's get started then. So let's start with vision. So for each of these, as we go through each of the 3 Vs, we are going to be, I have 3 subtitles or sub things, I guess. I haven't had a good name for them. That we're going to be covering. So with a vision, we're looking to motivate, plan, and communicate. So what we want to do is establish a great vision that is motivate. It's probably the single most important thing you can do as a product owner to motivate your team. If you can explain who you're building this for and why it's important to them, or in other words, why it's improving that person's life, and then have the opportunity to have your team meet that person each sprint, at least once a sprint, that's incredibly motivating for a team. So it's probably the best thing you can do from a motivation standpoint. We're also going to talk about how vision plays a role in planning. We'll look at ordering a product backlog or building a roadmap going forward. And then communicating it. Again, like I said earlier, having a great vision is one thing, but having people know it is more important than just having one. So if they don't know it, I would question if you even have a vision at all. So let's get started. What we want to avoid, we'll start with this warning here, are these big boilerplate vision statements. This used to be a tool. I guess it's not online anymore, but on Dilbert's website, you used to be able to go and it'll take all the latest buzzwords and build your own vision if you don't have one. It'll throw something together like just complete randomly. It's our responsibility to collaboratively promote quality information while continuing to authoritatively provide access to interdependent technology. Beautiful, right? It hits you right in the heart. These sorts of statements, they get ignored. They're useless. What we want is more practical, real, emotional ones. So that takes us to our first kind of example. Imagine you're brainstorming with people and you're in a remote world, and you maybe use something like Office, a PowerPoint, let's say, a remote version of PowerPoint where everybody can be looking at the same time and moving things around. This is a great activity called Two Brains. It's from the book Game Storming. There's a link to it in the bottom there. So as we're bringing things out, we have everybody, you'll see there's a pattern that I've noticed that I like to use a lot with collaboration is always start with silence and let people come up with ideas, but then come together. Now, one of the benefits I've noticed that I was referring to earlier with remote stuff is when you're in person around a whiteboard, there's only so many people that can be there. And it takes a while to write something down, put it up, and you're getting in each other's way. And you're seeing what other people are doing and you're holding back. And what we've noticed now with remote ones, you give a group like 2 minutes, not much time at all, and one space that they can write stuff on. Within 2 minutes, with 10 people, you'll have dozens and dozens and dozens of ideas, just stuff piled in. And then that kind of kicks it off. You can start to move things around. So imagine we gave them a 2x2 like this, practical versus emotional. And we had stuff like, I don't know, this is our vision is to manage the workflow for a CPA. Where would we put that? Well, it's not very emotional, certainly, but I would argue because manage isn't very good. It's probably more, it's not even that practical. So how do we make it more practical? What if we had something that described what it did? How does it manage it? Why is this important for a CPA? Why would they use it? They manage their own workflow. Well, maybe it speeds it up. Okay, it speeds up the workflow. Let's see, where can we put that? Let's move it over to more practical, but we still don't have any emotion. So how do we get it emotional? What if we asked, if we've successfully sped up the workflow of a CPA, how would that make them feel? Let's talk about accountant feelings for a sec. Maybe you say something like it'd make them happy. So what if we said our vision was to have happy CPAs? Where would you put that? Well, we've kind of lost the practicality there, and now it's just about emotional. Once you start moving in this direction, the obvious area is the top right where we want to be. So the question would be, what is it about speeding up the workflow that would make them happy? Maybe they don't have to spend as much time at work. Maybe they can get home, maybe home in time for dinner, even during tax season. So just having an activity like this, a brainstorming session where you're constantly trying to get stuff up into the top right quadrant can really help. So this is the creation of a vision, working with your teams and your stakeholders to get there. So imagine now you've got somebody on your team, maybe he's or she's a DBA or a technical writer, or when they usually ask what they do for a living, they might say, well, I help, I update database tables, or I write documentation or something like that. But now what I want them doing with a good, effective vision that's emotional and practical, I want them to be able to say, I help accountants get home in time for dinner, even during tax season. And I get to meet them at least once a sprint in the sprint review. So anyways, a little bit on visioning, and I don't want to get too far in the value of visioning. I could do a whole talk just on that. But this is sort of a way that a team could collaborate remotely to put something together like this. Another thing you can do from a visioning perspective, there's a very popular technique called Product Box. It's from a book called Innovation Games. There's a website too. And this, what you're looking at here, is actually 6 teams putting together simultaneously a product box. So what it is you build a poster or the cover of your box for your product. So you get people to collaborate. And what we found is we used to do this in person with like magazines and glue sticks and stickies and markers and all sorts of stuff. And it works just as well remotely. So in this case, we had 6 teams going out. They're finding images on the web. We gave them a series of icons. Mural is what we use for this. Mural comes with countless icons that they can bring in. And in 10 minutes, they're able to come up with an idea for it. So it's basically describe what the cover would look like to it. And just in doing that alone, it will get people rallying around a vision of why they're doing this. So what we ask them, we give a little bit of guidance, focus on one customer, focus on a value proposition. And then what comes out of that is pretty amazing. So this is using Mural for it, but it's just each team had their own space and they can build their own stuff. Great for an activity. If you had an hour-long visioning meeting, I might spend 20 minutes doing something like this first and then moving on to the next site. Continue.co, which is now bought by Scaled Agile, it was created by Luke Homan, who's the writer of the Innovation Games book. So it's got templates and stuff for all innovation games in here. And as a product owner, you should certainly be aware of these innovation games, and Product Box being one of the more popular ones, but there's lots of others. Other things to look at. This is a very popular elevator pitch template. This came from a book. I should have put the link on there, but this came from a book called Crossing the Chasm way back in, I forget now, 80s, 90s, maybe early 90s. But ultimately, the book was about how to take your product to the next level, not let it die. And with it, the author introduced a vision, a template for a vision. So he called it the elevator pitch template. And it looks like this. So this is something you could do in maybe Google Docs. You put something up like this. Here's the template. And then together we start to brainstorm. We start to go in and write by ourselves, or put stickies on it for some of these other tools. But it's for a target audience, one customer who has a need. Let's understand the customer's need that has one key benefit. What's our differentiator? Or then it says even further, how do we separate ourselves from the competition, or what our customers are doing today? Understanding all of these is key, and it's something as a product owner, I always ask for if I just show up to a team for the first time, maybe as a consultant, I'm going to ask for this. If my product owners don't have this, then that's the first thing we'll do together is we'll put something like this together. The template itself isn't what's great. It's the conversation, what you come up with it. I might start with this and then move to something like the 2 brains activity to kind of distill it into something better, but certainly easy enough to do remotely. Other things that I've done, this is on Mural. This is a built-in template to Mural. And it's called, actually, I think it's something like future postcards, but we called it testimonials because we were talking about our training department, and we were looking at a 5-year roadmap for training. Now, what it is we were able to create a bunch of categories here from a training client's perspective, a coaching client, the people that work at improving, organizations that use us. And then what we were able to do is talk about 5 years from now, what are the worst testimonials we could have? Worst case, and we would write them here. What if we didn't change anything? What would those testimonials be? And 5 years from now, what would the absolute best testimonials from our customers and our own people be moving forward? So this got us thinking of the future, and then we took themes from that, and we kind of summarized them over on the right in the next steps section. So what are the summaries, and then what actions can we take to move this forward going forward, and what are some of the major risks that get exposed from that? So this is a great thing you can be thinking about for a 5-year visioning road mapping activity for your products as well. Think about testimonials from your customers or postcards that they could write to you that they would send in. What are the best ones and the worst ones? And what if you don't change at all? What are they saying now, and how does that going to affect you going forward? So this is another great activity that you can do. In this one, we had 6 people all just contributing for 5 minutes, walking through the whole thing. Actually, I think we might have needed more time, but 10 minutes. And then we would go over it all together, and we would follow it around, talk about it, and then summarize it in the next steps section. Something else, this is story mapping. This is actually for an actual client a while ago. Maybe I should have blurred some of that out. But this is if you're familiar with story mapping, it's really kind of talking about a flow, and then what is the most important things that we need to do. The time will move down, and these lines represent big major releases or milestones. In this case, it was our MVP was this first line. So minimal viable product. So what we needed to do is get these things done under these categories up top. And we did this all remotely. This was done with Contenio Weave product. And we kind of pulled all this stuff in from their Jira application. We imported it or exported it in Excel, imported it into Contenio Weave, and then we were able to put all these items up here. So the categories are up top, and then the actual product backlog items were beneath them. So the very first thing we would do are these 2 top ones, and then we would slowly start to move down through this each sprint. When we got to the line, we were at our MVP. So this was done with like 20 people collaboratively moving these around and having discussions all remotely from a story mapping standpoint.
Hey, Don,
yes.
I have a few questions up to this point.
Awesome.
The first one would be, who would you recommend to have the 2 brains exercise with? Would it be with team members, stakeholders, and should the team be involved with the generation of vision?
Yes. Yes to all of that. It is so. As a product owner, I know that. So absolutely, I want to do this with my stakeholders, 100%. Then the question is, should I be doing this with my team, my development team? And if I don't do this with my development team, what am I going to have to do eventually? I'm going to have to go through. It's not like we're producing these big detailed documents that they can read and get all this information. So I'm going to have to go through and give them a sense of what this vision is and what inspired it. And then they're going to rely on my ability to communicate it. What if instead this team was in there with the people that have a stake in this, helping craft this, or even just listening to their conversations? Would they not hold that vision much closer? So if you have the luxury of having a development team that can come to this while you're doing it, then please take advantage of that. It is huge. The only real risk is if they get too solution-y, but that's an easy fix. You can remind them of that. You can steer them of that. Getting them face-to-face and crafting this with the customer, and then getting a chance to build this and show it to that customer every sprint, at least every sprint, it's huge. It's a huge opportunity. It's even better than the actual vision statement itself, is the feeling they get from the customer and understanding their needs, because you're going to have to explain it all to them anyway. So absolutely take. The only time I don't involve my development team is sometimes, and this is for as a consulting firm, this happens to us, is we might have to do a lot of this before the development team is even put together, right? So we might have to do all this and put a bid in and build a plan before it gets a greenlit. Like the vision might have to be done before it gets greenlit. If it's not greenlit, we get no team. So we may not have a team, and in that case, I bring them all back together to talk about the vision and even introduce them to stakeholders. Good question. Was there another one, Michael?
Yeah, this one might be slightly off topic, but how would you go about creating a vision for an existing software product?
That's a good
Or
one.
an existing no software product, if I read this
Yeah,
question correctly.
and I want to make very clear because it can come across that way because we are a software company, but a big and growing number of our clients are not software at all that are doing Scrum, for example. And so I think our largest two clients it's not even software. So this applies for anything complex, any product that you're building. Sorry, what was the first part of that? It was a good question. I just blanked out on it.
It was, how would you go about creating the vision for the
For
existing no software?
Yeah. So if it's an existing one, actually, I'll go the opposite. It's even more important if you have one and you don't have a vision for it. It's even more important. The harder it is to come up with a vision, the more important it is to do it because it's not always obvious. Sometimes there's some system that talks to another system and another system, and you get something and you hand it off to something else. It's hard to build a vision around that, but there is one. Somebody's life is being improved by the work you're doing. So the vision job is to bring that to life, to talk about who that person is and how we're improving their lives. But you have to admit that all the work that your team's doing is improving somebody's life, no matter where it fits. Build a product around that. So if you have an existing one, ask yourself, what's the vision? It's kind of like a CEO. If I'm a CEO that comes into a company, the first thing I'm going to do is ask, well, do we have a vision here? And if I believe in it, I carry the vision, and my job is to keep communicating it. If they don't have one, then my job is to craft a vision or update a vision so that we can have something to aspire to, that we can look forward to. It's the same job that you have as a product owner. If there isn't one, get one. That's your job. And there's always a good vision. All right. So please continue with the question. I'll move on with this, but I'll pause in a little bit after this section for some others too. But good questions so far. So how do you communicate the vision? When are some good opportunities to do it? Well, here's one that I see. This is Trello. Many of you may have seen Trello before. So yet another tool that I'm going to just throw the name in too. So Trello is a very easy thing. I did blur this one for a client. But what Trello does is it allows you to update the backgrounds. And I kind of like that. What if you updated the backgrounds to actually show the vision, or maybe the sprint goal? So a sprint goal is like a little mini vision for the sprint. What are we trying to achieve that's valuable this sprint? One thing. In this case, we're doing it as the overall vision. So what if it's always there? Every day they're going in here, they're moving their work throughout the sprint, but right below it is, or right in the background is call times under 10 minutes is what that says. So our goal here is to get those calls. Right now they're at, I don't know, 14 minutes. We're doing this until we get them under 10 minutes, and we're constantly looking at this. That's our job. That gets everybody kind of aligned, and we're always celebrating every time we release and we see this thing budge down, right? So it's always there in their face all the time. Another way is the sprint goal. This is now Jira. If you use Jira, Jira has the ability, you can just say, I think it's like a little sprint goal button that you have up here. But in this case, while they're moving stuff along, you've got implement the new weather alert system, make over 50,000 customers very happy. This isn't one I did. I think I found this somewhere. But this is another great way. So please leverage this with your tools. You've got Jira. You can put a vision up in Jira as well, and then the goals for each sprint. Look at the sprint goal as what is the step that gets you closer to your vision? How does this sprint get you closer to your vision? The answer to that is your sprint goal. So keeping them at the forefront, that's your job as a product owner. In sprint planning too is an excellent opportunity to do this. One of the words I use a lot with visioning is keep them pervasive. You want to have a pervasive a vision, meaning everybody it's everywhere. Everybody knows what it is. I want my team rolling their eyes every time I bring it up. Going, oh, there he goes again. Because just when you think it's there, that they have it, that everybody knows the vision is when they don't. It's kind of like as a parent now. I have a parent of two kids, two girls, and I find myself saying the same things my parents were saying to me when I was a kid, and I would roll in my eyes too all the time. But at some point, it sunk into my head because now I'm saying it to my kids, constantly reminding us of these things is important. You see it in our company and improving. Our CEO is the same way. Like every meeting, he's always reminding us of our guiding principles and why we're here. It might seem like overkill, but that's what's needed. And so don't feel like you're overdoing it. So every sprint in sprint planning, I expect you to say, what is our vision again? All right, now, how is this sprint going to get us closer to that? And we work together on crafting a sprint goal is a big part of sprint planning. Here is an example of Mural. This is my colleague Ty had put this one together. So he's got a little icon here right on top of his board that they're creating. So we're creating a sprint backlog in sprint planning. We look at the product backlog. We talk about how much time we might have to work on this sprint. We forecast how many items off the backlog that we can use, the product backlog. And then we craft a sprint goal. We put it right there, make it clear. So connect the goal, the sprint goal, to the vision every time. And we'll talk about it, the sprint review at the end of the sprint too. So that's on the vision side. Any other questions, Michael, before I move into value?
Yeah, we did have one other question. Earlier, you mentioned having video on as the product owner. The question, though, is we have found video for everything can introduce additional fatigue and often times less focus on what's being said and more on the person. For this reason, we have optional video in meetings unless explicitly requested. Could you elaborate on why you think it's so important to have video in meetings?
Yeah, Ty talked about it in his. We lose so much when we don't see body language, and it's so hard because you're in front of your. If you're in a meeting, it's hard to be like watching. It's pretty obvious when you're checking email and stuff, and even if you don't intend to, these things pop up and your eyes get drawn. Even though I understand this, I find it affects me too. Video has you looking, and you're more self-aware, I find, just like you are in real life. So we're looking at each other in meetings in real life. Well, in real life, it's still real life, but when you're in person, when you're co-located, we are looking at each other. We're giving cues with our face. We're doing certain things. And I think that's really important. I've taught now, like our company has taught 12 classes remotely in the past 6 weeks. It is so hard as a trainer when you're talking to see if people are listening and understanding. And as a product owner, you're doing that too. You're teaching, you're training, you're communicating things like visions, which are hard. Seeing the nods in the faces or the puzzled looks in the faces become really, really important. Otherwise, it's kind of like this. Not seeing everybody here is hard for me. I'm just talking at you. And I can't see if I say something that kind of sits wrong. I can't like re-emphasize it. So it becomes very, very important to be able to see it. Now, I do not force it. I usually say something like that or talk about the science behind it. And then it's up to your team to come up with a working agreement. When do we have video on? When do we have video off? I had a team that said, hey, when we're eating, video's off. Like nobody wants to see or hear each other eat. But we should be able to see each other. I think it should be default. And my company's been going through this a lot now. We use Teams for everything, and it's video. It's just a natural thing that we do, and it's the leaders I've noticed that are doing it more than anyone. So with big companies, they do it on. They're setting example that, hey, I'm willing to show myself here and put myself out there. And I think as product owners, you're a leader too. And so even if the rest of your team doesn't feel comfortable, I would suggest doing it anyways. And slowly you'll start to see others doing it too. It's a whole different way of communicating than just on the phone. Anyways, that's my spiel on that. And since we don't have video and there's no back and forth, you can't follow up that question. So, so I'm just going to assume I gave the perfect answer. But please reach out to me as well afterwards. I'm really happy to continue these conversations beyond this session. So let's talk value. In value, we're going to talk about how to measure it. Identify value. Basically, this is going to be about putting things in a product backlog, what's valuable, and then ordering that backlog. So let's take a look at value. Now, here's an activity I like to do because it's a big sign of a project mindset if we determine value a different way. If we measure value based on time, budget, scope, we're thinking in terms of projects, not products. So the question I like to ask is, what metrics should we use? How will we know things are going well or poorly? And now what I've done, this is a real one that I did here with a real group of people. And we did this in Mural. The lines that you see, but delivery and value were gone when I started this. So I just said, take a few minutes, everybody just write stickies. And it's amazing to see on these tools. You just see these little cursors all over the place and just out of nowhere, all these ideas pop up. And there's just a ton of these metrics. And actually, if I scroll down, there's even more that we had. And then what I did is I drew a line down the middle, and then we went through them one by one. and we started putting them either to the left or the right. And based on whether they were more in terms of delivery metrics, they measure how well our project's going or how efficient or effective we are, how optimal we're running, versus what real value is. So things like budget is down here on the left, same with timelines and test coverage and utilization rate of our people. None of these indicate value of the product, right? But maybe we want to measure them. Who measures them though? And I don't want to, I could do a whole other spiel on the right metrics and value metrics, but just so you know, we call these cockpit metrics. They should be in the cockpit with the pilots. It's not for management. It's not for your passengers in the plane. It helps us fly the plane. So if you and your team as a product owner can look at these as a big dashboard of data to improve the way you work together, fantastic. If it's being used from management to measure you and your success, that's not so good. Instead, we would rather give them something shinier to look at. Those are the things on the right. Value metrics. How happy are our people? How happy is the customer? How usable is the product? Are they even using the things that we're building? Are we reducing cost? Are the customers showing up? Are we releasing? How often are we releasing? Is that getting better or worse over time? So time to market, is that improving? How innovative are we? Are we increasing innovation or lowering it? Are we spending too much time maintenance stuff? What percentage of our budget is spent on new innovative things that are going to take us to the next level strategically or not? So these are the things we'd rather be focused on. So having a little activity like this at the beginning, or maybe if you don't have these now, doing this with your team is a pretty effective one. And then putting these, and I'll show, and in the next one, we'll show you how you might even look at that. So this is using, we have a spreadsheet that looks like this. This is done in Excel online, so it'll work in Office 365. You can put it up and edit it and have it available for everybody. And these are our leading indicators of value versus our lagging indicators of value. In every iteration, we update these things. So cost per iteration, time to market, innovation, how much time our teams are spending in one project versus multiple, with context switching. These are all things we can make changes to today. That's why we call them leading. The lagging ones are on the right. So these are where we hope will change over time as we do the leading ones. So effectively what we're saying is, if we can release more innovative things more often, we expect that value, the lagging metrics will adjust over time. So this is done, this can be done with a spreadsheet done in Office 365 or Google Sheets. I think one of my colleagues put together the same thing in a Google Sheet as well that you can be using and looking at at least every sprint. But I don't know if your sprints are short, I don't tend to, 1 week sprints, this is hard to update every week. So we generically call these iterations, and maybe we do this once a month. Now, collaborating on a product backlog, there's a great activity that I learned, and I started doing this in person all the time. It's called silent collaboration. And what it is you get all your stakeholders, and kind of like the question before, maybe your development team members too, and just in complete silence, spend 5-10 minutes thinking about what should be in the product backlog, what features are valuable. And what you do is you write them all down, just put them next to you. Then you go up to a wall together as a group, and then you start to collaborate. And what we ask them to do is one by one, they put a sticky on the wall, but not one person dumps all theirs in and anchors everybody else. The product owner is no more important than anyone else in this activity. No more important than that programmer we hired just last week who's taking part, or the head of security who's a stakeholder as well. They'll focus on the things that are most important to them, and they have a chance to say one of theirs for every round. And they put them up on the wall and we discuss. We're not saying we're going to do them, we're just putting them together. So we came up with a remote version of this that I've done even before this whole COVID nonsense, we were doing this. So before we had to we were forced to work from home, this is something that I've taken advantage of a few times. So the idea is each person takes a letter. So here's Maria, Raman, Don, Jane, Mayu, all around here. So I took D. And then we would write stickies and we would just put them in our little section. And then once we're done with the silent period, we start to one by one go around and start to put them in the middle. Eliminating duplicates as we go, having discussions on whether they're appropriate or not, and dump them if they're not. But if there's any idea that maybe we would do it, we would put it in the middle. They're not ordered yet. There's just a bunch of things in the middle and everybody gets a say. So this is a great thing that I've done this with Mural. I've also done this with Weave, Continuo Weave as well. So just imported this image and had people write over top of it. So just as a template. So this is a great way to come up with it and identify where the value is, but it's not about ordering. So there's many ways to do ordering, but one way I've done is just right on top of this, I create a 2x2 of value versus effort, because value is not the only thing we use when ordering items in a product backlog. So what if I have two equally valuable things, one costs less effort, obviously I would go there. That's more low hanging fruit. So if I put a 2x2 like this and allow people to sort of self-organize on where these things go and have discussions around where they are, now I get a sense of an order in my product backlog too. So I would start with the things in the top left and work my way through. So the big effort, but big value. These are my big strategic stuff. And if you're not careful, they never get done. We never start these. This is why my kitchen took so long to get renovated. Just the thought of it, we never did it because it was just too big. What you need to do as a product owner here is try to break these down so they actually get done. What can you do in one sprint that can move this forward? Break them down, move them over to the top left. The bottom left we call fun sized. There's a term I picked up a few years ago. These are the little things that we'd love to do, but they're not deal breakers, right? But they're not off the backlog. We still want to do them. So having an idea of what these are can help as well. If you have a little extra capacity in a sprint, or you just hired somebody new and they're not comfortable working in the environment yet, maybe they can take some of these fun-sized items too. And the stuff with a lot of effort and not much value, consider dropping those. So this is a great way as well to kind of come together and put them together, use them in a backlog, in a 2x2. The long and the short of it is, if you can dream up visually how you might do this on a whiteboard or on a table, you could build something now with the tools today that equal that. And that's what I'm learning as we do more and more of this. All right, moving on. Sizing a backlog. So yeah, effort, the bottom, the x-axis here, effort and cost often is equated to size, or always equated to size, how much time it takes to do it, the effort remaining. And if you're familiar with the Fibonacci sequence and story points, and I don't want to get into debate about that, but if you are doing sizing, this is one I did years ago for a client. This is using Lino, linoit.it, or I guess it's linoit.com. It's just a virtual corkboard, nothing special. You don't really import. I guess you could send emails to it and they show up as stickies. Last I checked, but you could put a bunch of stickies on it. What we used to do there, and this was before Mural or Miro or Weave, we put all the numbers up top for sizing, and we would put all the unsized items in the bottom, and one by one we would take turns and move them up into this, one person at a time. A remote person would move it. And then we also call this white elephant sizing, because on your turn, rather than take an unsized item, you can also steal somebody else's that they already placed, but you have to give a reason for it. So we start to go through this activity until all the things under unsize are up here, and now we've got sizes on all of them. So that's sizing a product backlog. All right, so we've got the last section is validation. What I maybe want time for one quick question. Is there one, Mike?
Yeah, I do have a quick question. Do you recommend looking at all metrics that track value, or do you focus on 3 or 4?
So we can get into this more, and it might be a longer discussion, but I do always look for a WIG, which is a wildly important goal, something we can measure at a very high level, the thing that's closest to measuring our progress towards accomplishing our vision. Vision is meant to be aspirational and vague, and it's not expected to be. But if you can use something like that one I showed, which is, get call times under 10 minutes, is not quite it's more of that WIG, right? It's that wildly important goal. But not any one measure I've found measures value. So I expect that you'll have more than one. And the reality is, if you're using Scrum, you're likely in the complex world. If you're in the complex world, data is necessary. You need evidence. You need empirical evidence. So get used to, as a product owner, looking at multiple bits of data. I don't expect you to have 30, but at least like the ones I showed in that diagram, like the leading ones, you should absolutely be measuring innovation. You should absolutely know your cost every sprint, because that's your investment, and you're responsible for maximizing your return on investment. So you should know your cost every sprint. You should know your time to market. How often are we getting stuff out to our customer? And you should know how innovative you are. I mean, meaning how are we spending time on just customer freakouts in bugs and maintenance, or are we actually making progress on strategic items? Absolutely, at least those three. And then the outcomes of those, you should be measuring overall product costs. Are you lowering them, or revenue? It's one or both. It's never none of those two. Internal ones are often costs, and retail ones are often things. So, and then satisfaction, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. I draw the line at those, and then you likely will have some custom ones that may apply more specifically to your world that you should be looking at too. So come up with a WIG and at least measure those going forward. They should apply in almost every situation. All right, finally, validation, reviewing, learning, innovating. So let's start with the sprint review. So the end of the sprint. The worst kind is a PowerPoint one. I say this for in-person ones as well. If you have to give PowerPoint slides of like screenshots of the work that you did, the work hasn't been done. So instead, hand control over to stakeholders. Like imagine in teams like we are here, we ask them to use the product, and maybe they share their screen and we watch them use it, and we guide them, and we have them do the clicking around instead of us. Have them use it. You'll see how that's much better feedback than anything else. It's a much better way to learn and to validate your ideas. And then based on that feedback from the product, and ask them, what are they seeing out there in the marketplace? You know, coming up with something right in a product backlog like this. This is a little diagram that's easy to create in any of the tools we talked about. I have a question mark here because I really just found this online. So I just did a quick search, but I've done things similar to this a lot. Now, next, later, and never. So as they're coming up with ideas, we could quickly sort them here. The now and the next will likely find themselves in the product backlog. Later, we'll have to think about or put them in the roadmap, not really in the immediate product backlog. So let's be explicit. Let's put them in here. You might even, as a product owner, have an area of let me think about it kind of thing. Let me look into it. But doing this where it comes out of sprint review with an actionable plan, an actionable thing, I think is crucial in a sprint review, in person or not. But it's absolutely possible when you're distributed like this too. On the right is a agenda that this is one that my colleague Ty uses. This is his one that he's used for an actual team for a client. So that's an example of what the things you can do all of this in a remote setting. From the other thing that I like a lot from a feedback perspective or a refinement perspective is this concept called office hours. Right? We came up with that when we had a busy vice president as a product owner, and she said she's willing to give time to the team, but she needed to block her time, otherwise somebody else takes it. And it took us a few sprints of struggling with that before we came up with this idea of office hours. So every day between the hours of between 2 and 3 p.m., she was in her office, and that's when we could come talk to her. But our team was like worried because we're like, we don't have stuff for you every single day. So we may not need to talk to you. We just don't know. And she said, that's fine by me. You mean I get to have an hour in my office to catch up on emails and all this stuff? That if you don't need to show up, don't show up. I'm cool with that. This is something that I've noticed happen in the last few weeks as well, is that certain people will say, hey, I'm going to be in my personal Zoom room or team room or whatever. If you ever, I'll have maybe I have my video off and sound off, but when you jump in, I'll hear you. And then we start talking. So having this this office hours, like professor hours in there, like we did in college, is a good idea as well as a product owner. So if you want to just make yourself available where they can't just see you in the hallways anymore, maybe you do something like this, that you block your time. Maybe it's once a day or whatever makes sense for you. And make it very clear that your stakeholders and your development team members can come to you during this time with anything. Refining the product back, asking you questions about the work they're doing, trying to get something on your product backlog, remove something from your backlog. This is a good opportunity to do it. So consider that with a personal Zoom room. I find works nicely. So it's always the same area every single time. You put it up in your wiki. Getting feedback too. So getting feedback from the external. We've talked so far about internal people, but even your best, smartest people in your organization don't know what the right thing to build is. Until you've put yourself in a situation where you're getting feedback from your actual customers in the real world, then you've got risk. So you see it more and more these days. Like Office has this little, tell us what you like, what can we do better? You've got certain things that can tell you the mood, and like this is, I think, was Mint uses this, where in their rooms where people are complaining about stuff, it can actually sort of tell you the mood week after week after week in their chat rooms and their or frequently asked questions rooms or whatever it is they have. Now, as a product owner, you can put this in your product backlog. You could say, like, you've seen this on websites like Home Depot, Walmart has it, all the big companies have it, a little feedback area on the right. That's an easy thing to do. It's like there's a service you can just buy and put right there to collect feedback. That's the easy thing if it's a website. But even if it's not, right, this is standard NPS stuff. Net Promoter Score gives you a standard thing you can measure against other people in your same industry. How likely are you to recommend your critics? These are promoters, neutral people, and then anything 6 or lower are detractors, and it gives you a percentage. But you can build this, put these on your backlog. Say, we want to build a Net Promoter Score, built it into our workflows. Can we do that? So you might need to do this more if you're not able to interact with your customers face to face, especially and don't just think this is retail. You product owners that are building internal systems for people, or just internal work or process flows. It doesn't have to be software. Consider doing stuff like this as part of their work and put it in your product backlog to get feedback from the marketplace. When it comes to innovation, this is a business model canvas. No time to go through all the elements of a business model canvas, but ultimately it's about customers and their value, and then the channels that you get to, and then how you make money off of it. Well, imagine building it out for what you do today. You have a business model for your current product. What if you then went through the whole thing with the guidance? And this is Miro. This is Miro, which is a tool like Mural. I know the names are similar, but you can do this with almost anything. Then your guidance is, okay, you start with customer segments and ask your participants, your stakeholders, which customer segments do we not currently hit, but we could in the future? And think of anything, get crazy if you want to. And then now for each of these customers, what value propositions could we possibly get to them? How do we get this value proposition to these customers? And then how are we going to make money off of this or lower costs? So maybe a different color sticky like this might apply. So you can start to see this could start to build out a roadmap for the future, or big innovative things down the road that you might want to focus on to pivot towards, to think up new. So if you feel your product's sort of in a stagnant world, this isn't a bad thing to come up with from a feedback perspective. Do this with your actual customers. So to wrap this up, a final tip. I've shown you a lot of different things, and there's a lot more out there too, but it might be overwhelming. One thing you might look at are some of these tools that we've kind of talked about, the murals and the weaves and the Miros and the Linos. But a lot of these come with templates that can help. And I've gotten ideas just by looking through their templates going, hey, that could be cool if we use this for my customer. Here's some examples. Like Mural has things like road maps and risk walls and really big sketch pad hills. I haven't even scratched the surface on what they have available here. This is where I got like the feedbacks from the postcard from the future I got from Mural. So take a look at that. When you go to create a new mural, you'll see a lot of these. And there's a free version of this you can play around with. They've got icebreakers and brainstorming and empathy stuff that you can do. A lot of stuff that apply to product owners for product management activities. This is Continuo Weave, now owned by Scaled Agile. They've got all sorts of stuff in here: retrospective, speedboat retrospective, and whole product and SWOT analysis. Tons of stuff that you might find applicable here too. Empathy maps and fishbone activities. And in Miro, which is a tool that I've only used once, and it's kind of cool. They've got all sorts of stuff from mind maps and user story mapping and retrospectives, brain writing, a ton of stuff. I'm just reading to you now, but you can play along with this all you want. And then something else you might want to look at. So I actually do have a website. It's called Tasty Cupcakes. It's not as fun as it sounds. It's not really about cupcakes, but it's a community website we've had for over 10 years now. And we've opened it up we started with a bunch of games activities you can do with your teams to do things or learn about things. And it's grown since then, but you'll notice the community can add games to it. You'll notice for obvious reasons, the last few months, they've got a certain theme. People are adding games that you can play with your teams remotely. So here's one about rapid estimation game for remote teams. Here's virtual world Scrum simulation. Here's Ballpoint, which is very popular way of communicating work in progress in the agile world. But WFH stands for work from home. So doing this from a remote setting. So take a look, scroll through these, almost any activity you've seen, you've gotten value from the past, challenge yourself to do it remotely. So just remember, right, we've gone through the 3 V's here, but remember, don't let the fact that you're distributed be an excuse not to collaborate. It may be more work right now, but please understand that there's even benefits for doing this remotely, and hopefully you'll see that. So that's pretty much it. Let me wrap this up and then hand it back to Michael, and maybe we squeeze a question or two in. But just so you know, we do have remote classes now as well. So as a part of this webinar, we're offering $400 off. Using this code VLNL-400, you get 400 off. You can sign up at our Improving website /training. But June 3rd and 4th, June 23rd, we have product owner courses. I'm teaching the 3rd to 4th one. The Scrum Master one next week, I think there's only like 2 or 3 spots left that Ty's teaching, and then one June 16th. So if you're interested, we've got a lot more as well if you're in a lot of other classes if you want to check it out. So thank you for hanging in there. I really sincerely hope this provided some value to you. My information's here, website, Twitter, whatever. LinkedIn is a great way. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to continue the conversation there as well. It's a great way to keep in touch. What do you think, Michael? Do we have time for a question, or should we wrap it up?
If you could just review, Don, some of the remote tools that you have as favorite tools.
Yeah, actually, what I will do, why don't I bring this up? Oops, I should have just put it right here. I'm going to go back to a slide, this one. So the tools that Lino is an old one I've used for a while. It was like my go-to, but I think the ones that have kind of come on is Mural and Miro. So if you Google these, Mural, Miro, I should have put the websites in here. Those are some pretty awesome things that you can look at. You can see now. Continuo Weave is continuo.co. I remember that. Or Mural is mural.co, I believe as well, but don't hold me to it. These are just explore these ones, and then also I've seen some cool things happen with PowerPoint online. I've seen people design out diagrams and stuff with PowerPoint remotely using Microsoft Teams in PowerPoint and Excel spreadsheets. Same with Google Docs. They're pretty amazing in how you can just sort of type at the same time. And I've seen people writing the same sentence at the same time. So those are some of those tools there. But if you want more information or want proper links, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to point you in the right direction. And there's more out there too. These are just the ones I've run into. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of other ones as well. Cool.
All right, thank you, Don.
Well, thank you all very much. I'll hand it back to you, Michael.
Yes, thank you everyone for joining us today on our Lunch and Learn series. We have more coming up next week with John Anderson, migrating small and medium businesses to the cloud, as well as Mike Bruce on Friday, the 3 ways for awesome DevOps. Thank you again for everyone joining, and please take the survey link I've posted in the announcement section.
Thank you, everybody.